All right, let's dive right in. We're going to be talking about one of the most profound shifts in human history, period, the scientific revolution. And this wasn't just about a few new inventions, not at all. It was a complete rewiring of how we perceive reality itself. So let's see how it all happened.
To really get the scale of this change, just look at this. On the left, you've got a world pretty much run by ancient authority and, well, divine mystery. Then on the right, a whole new world starts to take shape, one based on what you can see, what you can measure, and the laws of nature. That jump from column A to column B, that's the story we're exploring today.
So what was that old world actually like? Well, for more than 1,000 years, truth wasn't really something you went out and discovered. It was something you inherited. Knowledge was basically locked away in the texts of ancient Greeks like Aristotle and Galen, and their words were backed by the incredible power of the church.
And the absolute centerpiece of this whole worldview was the geocentric model. The idea was pretty simple, and to be honest, it kind of makes sense on the surface. Everything up in the heavens, the sun, the moon, all the planets, they all revolved around a totally fixed, unmoving Earth. Now, this wasn't just a science thing, it was a religious one too. It really reinforced humanity's special central place in God's creation.
You know, a worldview that sticks around for over a millennium doesn't just pack up and leave overnight. So what lit the fuse? Well, it turns out a few key things happened that created the perfect storm for brand new ideas to finally take hold.
There were three big catalysts. First up, you've got medieval universities, which started treating mathematics and astronomy as really serious fields of study. Then, during the Renaissance, you had wealthy patrons funding new investigations into the natural world, right alongside their fancy art projects. But the real game changer? The printing press. Suddenly, a radical idea could spread across Europe faster than ever before.
And that brings us to the main event, the incredible, dramatic teardown of the old cosmos. This was a battle, for sure, but it wasn't fought with swords and armies. It was fought with math, with telescopes, and with ideas so radical they shook the very foundations of society.
Now, what's so interesting here is that this wasn't some single eureka moment, not even close. It was a slow burn, a 150-year-long process. It's like a relay race. Copernicus kicked it all off with his mathematical model. Kepler refined it, showing that orbits weren't actually perfect circles. Then Galileo comes along and gives everyone actual visual proof. And finally, Newton brings it all home with the grand theory that explained the whole shebang.
To really get how revolutionary their ideas were, you have to understand what they were up against. The official dogma was that the heavens were, literally heavenly, perfect, flawless, and totally separate from our messy, imperfect world down here. This was a statement of faith just as much as it was a statement of science. And then, Galileo points his newfangled telescope at the sky. And what did he see? Not perfection. He saw a moon with craters and mountains, just like Earth. He saw tiny moons zipping around Jupiter, which proved that Earth wasn't the only center of motion in the universe. His direct observations just shattered that whole idea of perfect, godly heavens. This was the new power of empirical evidence in action.
The absolute climax of this whole astronomical shakeup came with Isaac Newton. He came up with a single beautiful law of universal gravitation. Get this, the exact same force that makes an apple plop down on the ground is what keeps the moon locked in orbit around the Earth. All of a sudden, the universe wasn't some mysterious, unknowable divine kingdom. It was a giant, predictable machine that ran on laws we could actually figure out.
But hey, this revolution wasn't just happening way up in the stars. At the very same time, a new generation of thinkers was turning that exact same critical eye inward to the mysteries of the human body itself.
For centuries, medicine was completely dominated by the humoral theory from the ancient Greek physician Galen. Feeling sick? Well, that must mean your four essential fluids, your humors, were out of whack, and the cure was often to rebalance them, using methods like bloodletting.
But a new crew of pioneers just completely rejected this. Paracelsus said, no, disease is a chemical thing, so it needs chemical cures. Vesalius basically threw out the old books, dissected human bodies for himself, and created the first truly accurate maps of our anatomy. And William Harvey used experiments to prove the heart wasn't some mystical center of emotion. It was a pump, simple as that.
So, we've seen these incredible discoveries happening in the cosmos and inside our own bodies. But underneath all of that was a revolution in thought itself. These thinkers weren't just finding new facts. They were basically inventing a whole new way to decide what even counts as a fact to begin with.
This led to two incredibly powerful and kind of complementary ways of thinking.
On the one hand, you had Francis Bacon's empiricism. Start with what you can observe over and over again, and from there build up to a bigger theory. On the other hand, you had René Descartes' rationalism. Start with one single truth you absolutely cannot doubt, like his famous, "I think, therefore I am," and use pure logic to figure everything else out. You put those two together, you get the engine of modern science.
Now, it's really tempting to look at this whole period as a story of smart, enlightened geniuses completely tossing out a dark, superstitious past. But the reality, well, as usual, it's a lot messier than that.
And here's what's just so fascinating. These absolute giants of reason, they still had one foot stuck in the old world. Isaac Newton, the guy who gave us the laws of motion, spent a ton of time practicing alchemy, trying to turn lead into gold. And Johannes Kepler, the man who mathematically proved the Earth goes around the sun, he also paid his bills by working as a court astrologer, casting horoscopes. It just shows there were these incredible transitional figures, with a piece of the past and a piece of the future inside them.
So, if we boil it all down, what's the single biggest takeaway from the scientific revolution? It's this: the whole source of truth shifted. Authority no longer came from who said something or how long people had believed it. Instead, real authority now rested on evidence, on observation, and on logical proof.
And that leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today as it was 400 years ago. In our own lives, where we're just buried in an avalanche of information from experts and influencers and everyone else, how do we make that same choice? When do we trust authority, and when do we demand to see the evidence for ourselves? That's definitely something to think about. Thanks for watching.